All right, next, it is time to get real. We're going to talk about some in the weeds, real life enterprise AI use cases, both looking at what's possible today and what's coming tomorrow. And to kick this panel off, I am excited to welcome to the stage Tanya, the LinkedIn technology editor. You've likely seen a lot of her great work if you spend nearly as much time on that platform as I do. And the rest of our panelists, Nisha, Sofia, Casey, please come on down. And use the center if you don't mind, just so we don't hit the camera.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I was going to make the joke about it's just me keeping you from the drinks and happy hour, but I see that's free flowing here, so kind of have to come up with a new opening. So I'm going to kick it off and give it up for our panelists right away. Casey, Nisha, and Sofia, why don't you give a ChatGPT style, succinct 10-second introduction?
Sofia.
Hey everyone, I'm Sofia Vizitiu. I'm the solution design lead at Pipestream. I build automation and conversational AI for enterprise clients.
Hey, I'm Nisha Iyer. I am head of analytics systems for customer support at Atlassian. I lead the ML ops and tooling side of the company, so we build all the AI products for support.
Hi everyone, I'm Casey. I was on a panel earlier and I introduced myself as the chief dreamer of generative AI.
We know there's a big gap between the dreamers and the doomers, but everyone here is a doer. And the reason for that is because they're actually getting their hands dirty and building things from scratch, and that's what we're going to talk about. A lot of us, though, are just starting to think about this stuff. And the three of you have had some experience in getting your hands dirty for a few years. Before anyone even starts to think about building their own LLM or, using an enterprise LLM, what is it that they need to even get in order to start? Where do you start?
You need a problem that you're trying to solve. So I think that a lot of people just jump, from my experience. So my background is data science. I've been a data scientist for over 10 years. I have seen data science, ML, grow it to deep learning models, and now it's like this big thing, and everyone knows about AI because of ChatGPT. But I think overall, like I've seen so many times people wanting to start with the technology and the cool stuff and really not thinking about what problem are they trying to solve. And I think like those problems are where you start, right? Like any good product builder, you want to understand the user's pain points and understand the problem, and then think through what that solution looks like and where does technology come in to, augment and build out the solution.
So it sounds like get your data in order. Is that right? Sofia and Casey, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say so. I also have seen a big influx in clients coming up and saying, hey, we read this crazy news article. We want ChatGPT in our solution yesterday. And I think it's important to really sit down and figure out what problem you're trying to solve and what your goals are in terms of, okay, so we put generative AI in our flow. What is the outcome that we want to design for? Because sometimes it's not necessarily generative AI that will get you there. Maybe it's another form of AI. It might even be a rules-based approach. It might be a combination of all of these. So just sort of being open to the different mechanisms that can take you to where you want to go.
Casey, got anything to add?
Sure. So I'm reminded of this amazing manager, Werner Geyer, who leads human-centric AI in IBM Research. He gave this amazing NeurIPS talk a few years ago, and he said, you can either start with the problem or you can start with the technology. And I mean, either way is an okay way to do it as long as you involve the humans in the process. So I think you can do it either way, but I think these ladies are probably on something with starting with the problems too.
So we're here to tell you exactly how to do this. So my next question is, what are you guys doing? What are you building at IBM? Talk to us about certain pilots you're running, experiments, what you're seeing, what are the results, and how do you even measure whether it's working or not?
One of the use cases I've been involved in recently at Pipestream is for an airline client, and it's a client we've had for a while. But they were interested in using generative AI to build a travel recommendation engine for users. So we pretty much started there. We are retrieving real-time itinerary information from their APIs, taking the user through a quiz, or they can give a more stream of consciousness kind of dump of what they want in their ideal travel experience. And then we are generating 3 recommendations from that, and then the user can kind of gracefully transition into the actual transaction of booking that flight. So we're seeing use cases like that are more consumer facing, kind of exploratory, exciting, as well as more internal use cases. So for one of our streaming service clients, that solution we built for them can lead to live agent escalation. So if the automation doesn't fully resolve their query, then they can be escalated to a live agent. And so there we've built a generative AI component that summarizes the conversation that transpired up to that point, so that live agents who receive the conversation can quickly get up to speed on what took place, what issue they still have to resolve for the user. And they have anecdotally said they really love it. It makes their lives a lot easier. They don't have to ask repetitive questions or scroll back up to understand what happened. So yeah, people are, I think, pretty excited so far.
Customer service, as I'm sure many of you've read and heard, is one of the areas that's poised to change a lot, at least with generative AI applications. But I'm curious, how are you approaching it at Atlassian, as well as you're a co-founder at a startup? So what are some interesting ways that you're employing AI and testing pilots at both those places?
Yeah, so I mentioned Atlassian. I'm also CTO and co-founder at Conote.ai, and that is we synthesize insights. So we take you from insight to action. It's supposed to help with the user research process, so democratizing research so everyone is able to do research at the speed that is needed. And I could talk for hours about this. I'll talk to you after if you have questions. But I do want to touch on Atlassian because I am the head of analytics services. So we are building models for the customer support services department, which is we have around 1,200 support engineers. So that is a large number that have been doing things manually for a really long time. And we have a large team of data scientists. I have been there for about 9 months. And I guess like right when I started, we actually started doing data science. Like I think a lot of data scientists, which I've experienced in the past, have, been building dashboards, metrics, like not necessary predictive analytics. And now that AI is a big deal, it's exciting for us because we get to do a lot more cool things. But the big thing that we've encountered is a couple of things, right? One, we can use and employ AI in our customer service. The ways that we do it is more so internal right now because we want to test that we're actually getting the right information to the engineers before we go external. Another thing that we've noticed is that we know, but we have seen is the quality of our data is the most important, right? And I heard someone earlier talking about how data engineering is a huge asset right now, and people are I feel like an undiscovered, unspoken about asset. That is where we the quality of the data and the way that we transform and work with the data are the 2 big areas that I feel we are really focused on, so that we can empower AI across the company. And I think that the pilots that we're doing at Atlassian are more so if we can we reduce effort. Like our KRs are actually cut effort, cut contact, right? So like we want to be able to cut effort down and then have AI be able to help with external contact. But first we're going to test it internally and see how that works. So that's where we are.
Casey, take us under the hood at IBM.
Sure. Well, so I think I'd like to build on what Sofia said about, customer support. A few years ago, I actually had a whole suite of AI-based games, and they started with all the really cool researchers' papers with like the theories and the novel algorithms, all the good AI stuff. And my team was like, we just want to have fun and do playful things. And also we're human-centric scientists, So we built 5 games. One of them was around egregious chatbots. I mean, Sofia doesn't know about when chatbots go wrong. And we also had this other game where we would detect adversarial attacks. Pinyu Chen, amazing adversarial researcher.
That sounds pretty useful, especially these days.
Well, I mean, these days there's also a lot going on around poisoning attacks. And we had this really cute game where you would train a model, an LLM, to be poisoned. We did that. We did the hard part. And then you would try to guess what the back door for the poisoning attack was. I mean, everyone knows about poisoning attacks, right?
This seems like a really good strategy. Like, make it sound like a game and like have these internal, teams sort of face off, right?
Red teaming, blue teaming.
Exactly. Yeah.
We did that before it was hip.
Yeah, you should be talking to DC about it. Speaking of DC, there are a lot of concerns with the applications of AI. We were just talking about bias being one of them. It's prone to hallucinations. And these are just, top of mind right now. 2024, big election year, not just in the US, but several other countries. Misinformation is very top of mind. But obviously, a lot of implications if things go wrong at an enterprise level, too. What are some of your biggest concerns around AI application ethically? And how are you solving for them? What safeguards do you think are necessary to put in place?
I think there's a lot to be excited about with AI, and there's also a lot to be concerned and cautious about. I would say cautious. And at Atlassian, the way that I think we're very careful about what data we're training our proprietary AI on, and making sure we're not bringing in. I was talking to Tanya before the panel and saying that, one of my big concerns ethically, and what I think we have to be responsible about, is understanding what LLMs, like open source LLMs, many LLMs are, what type of data they are trained on, and thinking about the countries that have access to internet, that have public internet, and like what do those demographics look like versus maybe some other, information that might not be out there. So being cautious of that and making sure that we're, focusing on the subject matter at hand that we are trying to use the AI for. So, starting smaller instead of going full scale and getting things like maybe hallucinations or misinformation that may be communicating to external parties in a way that does not represent us, does not represent our culture, and doesn't really represent what people are asking.
I think I'm also okay. I think something I'm also nervous about is just the increasing influx of AI-generated information, like out in the internet, that anyone can look up, and maybe users don't necessarily know to what extent. I think people who are familiar with generative AI know to take everything with a grain of salt if you see a AI-generated article, but not everybody necessarily has that base level of understanding of where this information is coming from. So I think a lot of it is user education. So if I'm building a conversational experience that can expose AI generated content to a user, making sure there's something as simple as a disclaimer there to let them know, hey, this was not written by a human just now. If this is, critical information, you should double check that. And also, I guess one of my responsibilities as someone who implements AI for clients is also educating the clients. So I think there's responsibility for if a client requests generative AI in something we're building for them, educating them on what the implications are and how we should go about it in a way that's responsible and ethical.
Did we all hear about that conference that AI generated 2 women speakers? Yeah, that stuff happens. Casey, anything to add to that?
Sure. I'd love to build on what Nisha was saying about data and training. So back to my cute little dog and cat game. We actually, for that, ethically source the images. Now, there's this thing called marketing and like photos that actually they want you to use their photos and they put licenses on them.
Stock photos, anyone?
So when I told my team that we're building this cute little dog and cat game with poisoning, we're going to source them ethically from like that thing where they actually want them to be used. And we went and gave the lawyers the presentation and they were like, this is actually a delightful presentation.
Lawyers never say that.
Where's Adam? Where's Adam? I mean, I think it can be done, but it's super challenging. And Nisha's right. It's really hard.
So unless you've been living under a rock, you've definitely heard about all the chaos at one of the foremost companies in the space, OpenAI, which has raised a lot of questions as well, particularly about governance and AI. So my question to all of you, other things too, but my question to you is, do we have a governance problem in AI? How do we approach this? Forget at the federal level, there's an executive order. Within your companies, what is the right way to govern AI? Make sure you're doing things right. Make sure, there's checks and balances.
No, I mean, I think it's a really big problem. And as everyone has mentioned, we're just we're just at the very beginning of all the legal and regulatory challenges that are going to arise from this. I think just being as on top of your data as you can, just doing all the research you can and staying on top of the changing landscape, because what is true this week might not be true even 2 weeks from now. So just not making assumptions about where things are and staying informed.
Yeah, I know at Atlassian we have like a pretty rigorous legal process right now, especially with user-generated content. So, like it's almost more frustrating on my end because my team is like, why can't we build this? Like, why do we have to go through legal like 10 million times? But that also is like heartening to me to know that, we care. We're making sure that we're not just taking whatever random content so we can build something really cool and get output, but we're really thinking about like where are we getting the content from? Is it internally generated? Is it externally generated? And if it's externally generated, that takes us into a whole new landscape, right? Like we have to be that much more certain about like how are we measuring for hallucinations? What metrics are we using? What shows failure? What shows success? And I think those are things we're still discovering along the way and ensuring that we have in place so that when we do go external, we're able to show those proof points. Like I really liked what you said about being open and transparent about when content is AI generated. And I think also in that same vein, almost like having some metrics out there saying like, this is X%, like valid, or like this passed this hallucination, like some kind of information, maybe not like right when you get the excerpt, but like somewhere where you can access it as an external user to understand what part of this has AI generated and how valid do we feel it is as a company.
Another issue that sort of came up when all this stuff went down was, a lot of other competitors of OpenAI were trying to sort of woo their clients. And it also raised, I guess, the concern about not putting all your eggs in one basket. And, you were talking about, Nisha, you were talking about open source models versus closed source models. Obviously it runs the gamut. How should you be making those decisions? If you're an enterprise, is it safe to go with an open AI? Is it, better to use open source? How do you make those decisions?
I think, I have like a really quick answer because I work on both sides of the spectrum, right? I'm at like an early stage startup, and then I'm at a large scale enterprise corporation, and I see it in two different ways. At the early stage startup, like we have to get what we can with the amount of funding we have. And so when we can bring AI internal and proprietary, we will. Right now, we have a mix of where we're not just simply prompting APIs, but we're like we have a layered system, but it's not as complex and as proprietary as I would like it to be. At Atlassian, we have the opportunity to build internal systems. And I think at an enterprise level, I would say like whatever you can do internally, try to do that so that you can be safe, so that you can be ethical, so that you're not just jumping onto the AI bandwagon. I think open source models are great because you can really see you can tweak them more, right? They're not black boxes. With APIs, you get certain things in response and you're not really understanding what parameters, like what can you change. So I think like on the enterprise side, I would say like do as much as you can internally, and then like use the external pieces for maybe more pilots and to prove points, and then be able to like bring what you can in-house.
Yeah, I think in my capacity at Pipestream, I'm in a similar position to your startup, where going open source and building out fully proprietary AI it requires a lot of resources, a lot of really smart people in the room, and that's not super realistic for smaller companies necessarily. So I think you can take the pre-trained models really far from both the quality of the output and also safety perspective. But I would agree with you that it's always safest to do it internally and just have full control, because otherwise it's a black box and you don't know where the answer is coming from in a very specific way.
So I could go on and ask these ladies more questions, but I want to open the floor up to the audience. Anyone in the audience has any questions?
Is it easier from a legal and compliance perspective to build something for internal use than external use? And if so, are you leaning hard into that direction?
Yes. It's easier to prove a case. In my experience, it's easier to prove a case internally. It's way easier to get legal approval internally, and then, put the safeguards in place as you're building the internal use case so that you can go external.
Can I ask a quick follow-up on that? So how would you think about the team that you need constructed to start to build some of those pilots and gain momentum?
How would I think about? I mean, my team's built.
No, all right. So say you're starting from scratch, right? You're like, okay, I want to build use cases, a use case internally. I want to get support. Where would you start?
Once again, I'll go back to like my problem thing. I think it would be understanding the landscape of, like, let's say we weren't building what we were building. I would understand the landscape of the support like ecosystem, understand the biggest problems, and then say like, oh, hey, this is where I think we can cut, time back. We can save money. We can give support engineers more time back in this, and this. How can we apply is there a way to apply a technical solution? And the way my brain works is like for years has been like data science. Like I know that data science can solve this. And so now it's even more fun because we actually get the opportunity to like put that to work.
Only add that I think there needs to be some interdisciplinary people, like add all the artists, add all the designers, the engineers, the scientists. Then she's right.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Casey, because that's how you solve for bias in the first place. So it's not like steeped into your systems that you're building from scratch. Any other questions in the audience? I see one hand raised at the back. To your right, Joe.
Great presentation. I'm all the way in the back. I'll stand up so you guys can see me. So I do have a question about compute. Are you finding problems, especially if you're using like GPT-4, getting enough compute power for your models? And how are you prioritizing based on what availability you have?
It depends on if you're using an open source GPT-4 or a paid API, you're not worrying about compute because you're not maintaining it. I think that's also one of the downfalls of the harder things about having an open source model in-house is that you have to have an entire team that is dedicated to simply maintaining the GPUs. And so I don't have a straight answer to you, but I do know that we've done both, and especially like on both spectrums. And I think that's where I actually think about that's where what makes me think twice is the compute problem, and of just like more than compute, like the maintenance of those GPUs.
What about the trees? Like we also care about the climate, and some of those GPUs
and the trees
are also like carbon offset.
Yes.
The credits don't really make the trees grow back.
That's why we don't mine Bitcoin anymore.
Any other questions? All right, I have a last one for you. Given that we're almost at the start of a new year, again, GPT style, what are your top predictions for where AI will go from here?
I think it's going to get better at multi-step problem solving. I think right now it's quite good at single tasks, and there's still some hand-holding that needs to happen in terms of presenting it with a more layered, complex task and having that be broken down into subtasks that can each be kind of solved.
So one step closer to AGI?
I think so. I think so.
I think AI is going to democratize research because everyone's going to start using Kono.ai.
Little side note.
I think I agree with Sophia. I think that that we're just getting closer and closer with the releases of what we see with just OpenAI and like the other models that are out there. It's insane just where we've come from last year to this year. So I think we're moving at roller coaster speed when for over the last decade we were going much slower. So it's exciting to see what's happening.
So I'm thinking seriously about Eric's workshop, and I'm like, what do I want AI to help me with? And then I think back to Laura's panel and was like, I really feel like someone should ask the people what parts of their job they want to be outsourced to AI now, or their lives. Sorry. Personally, AI or not, is going to help me with holiday cards this season. There's going to be so many holiday cards.
Virtual or handwritten?
I mean, I actually like the human art, the human plus AI art. I like hackathons, all the holiday cards.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And thank you, Nisha and Sophia, for your time.